Welcome back to the Channel Angle. My name is Cass Cooper, and I am your host and a columnist here at CRN. I am joined today with Dylan Martin, who's a senior editor at CRN.com. What's going on, Dylan?
A lot is going on.
I know you're a busy guy and a parent, so thank you for joining me and hanging out with me a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about all things Intel. Intel's been in the news a lot. They've had some good earnings, but they've also had some changes that have kind of shook up the ecosystem. Can you tell us a little bit what's going on with Intel right now?
Intel has been several years into a few different turnaround attempts because the company is just not in the leadership position that it was several years ago. AMD is doing a lot to take market share from Intel in the CPU side. NVIDIA has become a much larger company revenue-wise because its GPUs are being used for AI. So Intel got a new CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, back in March. He's taking over from the former CEO, Pat Gelsinger, who was reportedly pushed out by the board in late last year. And so we had Intel's second quarter earnings back in late July, and I believe they did beat Wall Street's expectations on revenue. They're still suffering a lot on the profitability side. They're getting hit hard there. And Lip-Bu Tan wants to make his mark on the company in the hopes that Intel will become better. Intel is trying to catch up and exceed the manufacturing capabilities of Taiwan's TSMC, for example. That's one of the big issues. But on the other side, Intel has its products, the CPUs, et cetera, that they're doing well, and definitely we're seeing improvements, but Intel has been taking a hit competitively from AMD, NVIDIA. And so there's all that happening, and Intel is just, has been going through years of changes and restructuring to try to find a better way forward. Lip-Bu Tan, the new CEO, said that, they're going to be doing 15% layoffs. They did 15% job cuts last year too. So, this is a huge reduction over the last few years.
And we know when CEOs come on board, every CEO wants to make their mark, right? You want to come in and be a great successor, but 15% and then another 15%. And then there was another announcement.
Right. Yeah. So in that same second quarter earnings report, they said we're doing 15% layoffs, but they also said in the same breath that they expect their core workforce to be 75,000 people by the end of this year. And what they didn't say is that their core workforce at the beginning of the year was somewhere around 99,000. So that is more people than just 15%. That is closer to 25%. And so they said that this is going to happen through the layoffs. So huge chunk of people leaving through layoffs, but also attrition. So people leaving or retiring, there are just some roles they're not going to replace over time. They also said as part of that, they eliminated 50% of its management layers. So getting rid of lots of managers, that's been a huge focus of Lip-Bu Tan. He's basically looked at the org chart that Intel has and just being like, there's too many people in between me and the individual contributors, lots of managers in between. And so he wanted to flatten that. But yeah, it's interesting because I think the former CEO, Pat, a lot of people were excited when he started back in 2021 because he was out of the company for 12 years and he was generally well-liked and, had been at Intel for 30 years before he came back. But investors had just not been happy with the progress Intel was making under his leadership. And I think it was debatable on whether he was making the right moves. And Lip-Bu Tan is basically kind of carrying the baton in some ways, but he's trying to do what Pat Gelsinger set to do, but in a leaner way, less people, less money. So yeah, it's kind of it's a very heads down mentality right now, I would say.
And what I always find interesting is in this time in business in general. We're all being asked to do more with less. And I have to ask the question of do you have any insight as far as AI being used internally and how that's impacting? Because that is the prevailing narrative is that AI is coming for people's jobs and making it more likely that these bigger enterprise organizations are going to be making layoffs. But it doesn't I didn't see anywhere in your reporting whether or not that was the case or if that was just something that is a misnomer. Do you have any insights there?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I guess a couple things on AI for Intel. So like one of the big reasons why Intel is in trouble is because it really didn't do anything to catch any of the AI hype that's been happening over the last
Mhm.
few years.
Yeah, you
So much
mentioned
money has been
NVIDIA is, I mean,
yeah.
coming seemingly for a lot of people, not out of nowhere, but out of nowhere, right? Like they've been around for a
Yeah,
minute, but it's like the trajectory is just so fast and so quick, and there's just so much change and like rapid fire change that's happening, and these other manufacturers are having a hard time staying abreast and staying afloat in competition
right.
with them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cause like, I think what happened is NVIDIA for the longest time was just making graphics cards for PCs for the most part for gaming or, content creation purposes. But they were kind of quietly investing in using the GPU, the graphics processing unit, for other purposes like scientific computing. That was all the way back in like the early 2000s. And then they just kept investing on the software and hardware side. And then boom, OpenAI was already using NVIDIA's GPUs to train its models. And then, Sam Altman made that fateful decision to commercialize OpenAI's technology. That just flipped the switch and boom. And then that's kind of how NVIDIA, kind of became a household name and at least for now, the most valuable company in the world by market cap.
Yeah. It's all such good information because I think this is the whole point of the channel angle. It's a place where we can come together and we can take a little pieces of the things that we share on CRN and make them come to life and kind of connect the dots. So back to the question on the table, which is
Yes,
how is
Intel.
internal AI usage impacting the reduction in workforce at Intel?
So I will say the one thing that we have seen so far is as part of Intel's move to reduce costs, a memo that was distributed within Intel's sales and marketing group, which is where all the partner activity happens. And it basically said Intel is, for one, cutting a lot of marketing jobs within the sales and marketing group, and then outsourcing many of those functions to Accenture, which is, a global consulting firm. We write about them quite a bit. But part of that, so there's going to be employees at Accenture that are taking over jobs that were previously at Intel. But the memo also said that Accenture is going to be using AI to kind of, take care of some of the work that was previously being done ostensibly by humans in the past. And that news I remember reverberated beyond just the normal publications that write about Intel all the time, because it definitely seemed like a solid data point showing that executives believe that AI can replace some human processes.
Mhm.
You think about the Intel brand. Marketing is really important for Intel. Think about, that old like music tone they used to
I was just
have.
thinking of all the different commercials that would come out when the new data processor and chip and all that would come out. We see them on the Super Bowl,
Right.
we see them everywhere. So the fact that that marketing engine and the people behind it maybe aren't being replaced, but at least reduced by
Mm,
AI agent, to me, that's huge because that's not just impacts the business, but that impacts culture. We remember
yes.
those things. We think that they're separate buckets, but ultimately you remember those pivotal moments where they impacted the culture from a marketing perspective. So
Mhm.
that's actually really brilliant.
Connected to that, because there's a partner connection, which is, think about a PC you buy, if an Intel CPU is in it, you see that Intel badge on it.
Yeah.
And, Intel Inside was actually like, for a long time, a huge like marketing program of Intel's. And that's how a lot of money flowed from Intel to partners. It was basically like, hey, you're selling stuff with Intel on it. We will like help you. We will incentivize you to sell this.
Mhm, mhm.
There's definitely a lot of questions for me with this outsourcing move that Intel did. To what extent are AIs being used to either speed it up or reduce the amount of work that humans do? Because there is a lot of, there's market development funds for Intel and many other vendors in the IT channel. And market development funds is something where, Intel says, we will give you this money to market this product that has Intel processors inside, but you have to do X amount of things or whatever. You have to submit a claim for MDF. There's definitely like a lot of like back and forth between Intel and partners on submitting marketing plans, trying to get approved for funds, things like that. And I know just I don't know every possible AI thing
Yeah,
out there, but I know that AI is trying to do a lot.
yeah,
And I know that Accenture has actually talked about using AI for marketing in the past.
yeah,
So I do have more on MDF
yeah.
and partner stuff though.
Yeah, I do want to talk about, how are these things impacting the partners when we talk about, you have such an enterprise organization who's reducing their workforce and then that bubbles into the partner ecosystem. In your opinion, how is that impacting the partners specifically? And then we can talk a little bit about the changes that they're making to these programs that will ultimately impact the partners as well.
Yeah, I did talk to a distributor executive, and he did say that he's seen a change in people that he's dealing with, and a new person is not up to date on the systems that he uses to submit marketing plans and other things his company uses to interface with Intel on marketing plans. And so he's minor disruptions right now, and he's hoping that this will kind of get fixed pretty quickly, because if the disruptions last for too long, then that can kind of impact how the distributor
Yeah.
is able to market and work with Intel. But that's one example.
So kind of a few, bumps in the road, but it sounds like
Hmm.
the hope of this partner in particular was that it's just kind of like a growing pain situation and it'll be temporary. I guess we'll just have to watch and see how that impacts people's buying and their buying behavior over the
Hmm.
next 6 months to a year and continue to watch those earnings reports like you've been doing. Let's talk a little bit about the partner and prestige tiers because I think that was really interesting in the article you presented and it's pivotal for the organization or for partners to be aware of how these changes are. So thank you for reporting on that, but kind of give us a lowdown on what we partners need to know if they're planning on not just using MDF from Intel, but if they're just part of the program in general.
So Intel just announced that there are a lot of changes coming to Intel Partner Alliance. They're going into effect in October. And as you mentioned, they're introducing these two new tiers, replacing what have been three tiers. The tiers are basically what determines what level of benefit you get. So the previous tiers were member, gold, and titanium. Member being the lowest tier and titanium being the highest.
Hmm.
And you basically had to meet certain revenue requirements and other kinds of requirements on training and other things to be in these higher tiers. So
And
it's
when you
kind of a
say
big deal that
benefits,
they're,
you mean reduced cost per unit or like buyback? What kind of benefits are we talking about?
it's a good question because it's a lot.
Yeah.
I
So
know
it's an
that,
extensive list of benefits. It's not something that's just like a few things here and a few things there, but and essentially it sounds like the more you participate, the more you buy, the more benefits you get, kind of like Kohl's Cash, you know what I mean?
I laughed because I think I used Kohl's Cash to buy my PS5 like
I love that.
5 years.
Listen,
Not
hey,
all. It was just a little bit. It
it's
helps,
an effective program, man. I don't think I would shop
Yeah.
at Kohl's if I wasn't getting my Kohl's Cash, but I digress.
I mean, I think it's a good comparison because, I think a big role that partner programs play is like reducing the costs of partners to do business with these companies. So it's like, yeah, so there are various benefits, and some of those include incentives that can reduce the cost of buying products from Intel and then selling them to their customers. But yeah, so like, the tier thing is important. And one thing that I wondered when I saw that, oh, you're moving from three tiers to two tiers is anyone going to fall between the cracks? Because inevitably there are some people who may be a titanium partner, and then maybe they're going to become just a base level partner. They're
Yeah.
not going to be in the top tier. I mean, who knows? Maybe that doesn't happen, but it did make me think, like, are
Or
some partners going to
are they
lose benefits?
grandfathered in? Are they like,
Hmm. Yeah.
do years of loyalty count towards, your new status or something like
Hmm.
that? I kind of,
Right.
I think that's a really good question.
Right.
Maybe we circle back towards the end of the year, see where people are at.
Well, what I can say is I did talk to someone from Intel who is, a leader in the Intel Partner Alliance program, and he emphasized that no partner is going to lose benefits or value from what they currently have, and they will actually see an increase in value and increase in benefits.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, but
I think it's
sometimes
definitely
when people
fair.
say that and then they expect that, when it
Right.
actually goes into implementation, it doesn't pan out.
Well, that's yeah, absolutely. And that's what I am curious about is, like, kind of what are those asterisks? Are there any asterisks?
Yeah.
Because I think it's fair to be skeptical. Intel is definitely in a cost cutting mode. They cut a lot of costs last year, and they're, cutting costs this year by, it's like 1.5 billion between
At that
this
point,
year and
what are
next year
numbers?
in operating costs.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, so they are very, Intel is obviously in a challenge position right now. And I think they are definitely very sensitive to how they are seen with respect to their commitment to the channel. But, it's like, I am curious about how it plays out because, Intel's a big organization and they have a lot of responsibilities to, investors and to customers and partners. We shall see, is what I'll say.
Yeah. Well, I think that we are coming up on time. I think like it's very interesting to see how these conversations continue to evolve. Anytime an organization, like we said, goes through change at the executive level and the C-suite level, you're going to see a ripple effect. And it's good to be able to get together and talk about how that's going to impact partners, how that's going to impact culture, and what it means, in this age of AI for the future of work. And we look at these bigger enterprise organizations to kind of help the SMB sphere to figure out what could be done and what should be done, and maybe even to make some good steps and some missteps so that we can follow or avoid them if we can. Dylan, thank you so much for your reporting and for always being a resource. If you have more questions or anything that you want to learn about Intel, be sure to follow Dylan on all social media platforms. We would love to have your follow here at the Channel Angle, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, hopefully at some point.
Since the recording, semiconductor giant Intel struck a deal with the current administration for the U.S. government to take a nearly 10% equity stake in the company. The nearly $9 billion infusion was originally allocated as federal grants from the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, passed and funded under the Biden administration. Intel CFO David Zinsler said the move strengthens the balance sheet and signals confidence in its foundry business. Reports also say this followed a White House meeting after the president called for the resignation of current CEO Lou Paton. For more information and full coverage of this developing story, visit us on crn.com.